About that thing, they came, if they did clear all the trees out of the drive, they couldn't get across that anyway.
For Sam to call the meeting to order.
Yeah, let me go through it and scan some of them and see which ones I think are most applicable.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
I also will look at Norwood School District.
Miss Karen? Hey, good, how are you?
How are you?
Good.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry.
Hey, David.
How are you, David?
We're gonna call the meeting to order here in a minute, waiting on Sam.
Okay. My wife was caught in traffic, so I'm stuck at home.
Understand?
Well, I could have picked you up.
Right
by your house.
He's got the little one at home.
Oh, okay. I got
Yeah,
you.
my daughter would be quite a handful.
Yeah, so for my granddaughter.
She might have some good input.
Yeah.
So how old is she now?
She is 5.
Oh, good for her. That's an awesome age.
It really is. We're enjoying it quite a bit.
My youngest just turned 7 today.
Today?
Yeah, it was her birthday today.
Oh, wow.
We went out last night, Bart, because her mother, we gave her too much short notice. So she couldn't make it
how'd
tonight on her
Benjamin?
birthday. We had to go out last
Good.
night. Okay.
Right.
I was like, why didn't you take your, book that
Yes.
out of the truck? Is he at finals all week?
Yeah, she was born 2/22/17.
And then I was like,
Just glad to be
because he
home.
left his hat in there, and I was like, go get your hat. So then he goes out and he starts going through the truck, going through the bag in the truck. I said, take the bag out the truck and bring it in the house. And then I go back because I'm about to leave and come here,
Definitely
and
need
he
to
left
take
his
a ride
inhaler in
just to
there.
kind
And I
of,
was like, what?
just to kind of
I
get
don't
my
know
mind.
if this is a
Burnt
boy
out.
thing or what.
It's a kid thing.
Well, it's a,
No,
it's a
mine's are-
finals week.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a
Like
hard
every
just-
time I'm
just
like,
Say
ignore it.
Thursday.
I
Is he off tomorrow?
Oh, you did?
I think it's a boy
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
because I was talking to somebody else
You
about
better be careful
about
about
their
that.
no help son, and
No, I
they
mean,
were
I
like,
have
boys don't work.
Yeah, if I'm going
And it was a
local,
man.
I normally don't do it. I don't go in somewhere like West
She's like, boys
Larson.
don't work.
I'll go like
What do you
Birmingham
think?
around, you know, and I take the, oh yeah.
I don't know what
yeah,
goes
it just
on in
gets
their
too nuts.
head. Like seriously, like he
I'm
just
very
looks at me
careful.
like this
I
most of
really
the
am. I
time.
don't even like going.
Well, you weren't
Larson
talking about what he was thinking.
unless I have to.
So none of it went in.
Well, there we go.
Most of the time, it's like,
They don't see.
I'm somewhere else right now. I'll get to you in a
And
minute.
I've ridden for
It's a
50 years.
teenage thing.
So
Yeah.
it isn't that I'm not paranoid, and I do look for everyone, but you can't see everything all the time. You just can't do it.
Stuff happens so fast.
Yeah, it just goes so fast. But that's my stress
Did our
release.
printer blow
So
up?
I'll take a ride out
I
to,
don't know.
the park out there in Clarkson and watch the river for a little bit.
Do you ever go over in Illinois down the Great River?
Oh,
On
yeah.
on either side,
Oh,
either
I-
Grafton or Fort Charter?
I love to go down to Grafton, and I'll have lunch once in a while on it, just to
Yeah.
kind of,
That's a nice flight. It's
Yeah, it's a
comforting.
nice-
yeah, I, see, then I don't.
Cheryl's sister and brother-in-law go there all the time. There's
Yeah.
some restaurant there that has the best chicken.
Yeah, they have good chicken. I think their fish is good too.
Yeah, we've been there a long time ago. They
Yeah.
did.
But that's my way of just kind of, I don't have my phone, I call it an electronic leash. And That's what we called it when I worked for the feds.
Going down Fort Charters, because you're going through the bluffs, and you hit where the caves are, you get the cold.
Yeah.
Stop at Riverlands.
Yep, and it is a little
Bird
cooler when you're
sanctuary.
right alongside
Beautiful.
the river there, especially right
It's
now.
before you get to
You know,
Alton,
because the breeze is
right?
gonna pull that cold water breeze, it's
Yeah.
the coldness over to you, if there's any breeze.
What he's going ahead on the grandkids, the boys, they thought they got so excited.
Yeah,
Barge,
They got a car.
oh, I love to
I
watch
should
the
say the
barges.
ferry. I like to take the ferry when it's
Once
open.
in a while, I
The
take
River Museum is in Alton too, and
Is
you
it?
can go on the barge. And in the spring, you see the cliff swallows nesting underneath
I would
the,
love to.
The
take a
barge
ride
is
on the
cool.
barge.
I
really
went on
would.
there with my kids. They was
yeah, the whole museum
Thank
is
you.
good.
You kind of got to go around to get to the barge. I guess.
Yeah, you do, yeah,
Oh, I got it. I
to the
know.
museum too, I forget. Thank you.
I know what it is.
I do not.
Is there a reason why this one is paperclip?
I got
Right,
you.
I don't
and
know.
Oh,
Sam put
okay.
these together.
so,
Well, this is,
Oh.
the top page is the compilation that Sam put together, and the other page is just the raw data.
okay, I got this, so what's the top page then?
The top page is, it's stapled. That's probably why they were, this is, let's see, make sure. Yeah, this is the one. Oh, sure.
The one that's not paperclip is like the one I made, and then,
Compiled.
yeah, and then the
Are we getting
paperclip
each other's
is,
mixed up? This is a copy of this.
Yeah,
Okay,
so the other is the raw data.
yeah, the paperclip is everyone's responses.
All right, let's call this meeting to order, please. May I have a roll call?
Councilman Cleveland. Councilman Sassenhammer.
Yeah.
Councilman Hahn.
Here.
Councilwoman Rosso.
here,
Councilwoman Campbell.
Thank you. First item of business under old business is discussion of strategic planning, the SWOT analysis.
did Vicky get a copy? Did you get it?
Yeah, she submitted, yeah. So what I'd like to accomplish tonight is a brief review of the responses, and then try to determine the process to move forward. And that can be strictly through our administration. It could be a facilitator if we choose to do that. It could or not include public input in the form of a committee. It could be a citizens committee and us working at workshops, a combination of what do we want this process to look like? How are we gonna get where we wanna get? And the goal is to determine where we wanna be, set specific goals, and then a strategic plan as to how to achieve those goals. I will just highlight some of the responses that were repeated. There's themes here that were repeated, and again, you've got the raw data, but on the pro side, it looks like people are happy with our police service, they're happy with our admin team, we're doing a good job of managing our finances. We've got, UMSL came up repeatedly as an asset, if we can find a way to use that asset to our benefit. It's the big gorilla in the room. How can we use that asset and possibly the student population there? And housing stock. That was one that people are happy with the housing and your perception of your residents, or they're generally happy. The cons. Public Works needs some improvement. We're aware of that. Dennis is aware of that. We've had conversations. We know there's room for improvement with Public Works. Code enforcement is the same, whether it's understaffing or do we need to be more aggressive. I will tell you, and Sam enlightened me this afternoon. Rick spends a lot of his time doing inspections, which has nothing to do with code enforcement. There's just a lot of time eaten up in that. Now, we're working on getting him some help, but we haven't been able to fill that position haven't found the person that's gonna work. Other challenges, and they're gonna be harder to deal with, the school district, juvenile crime, and the big one is limited financial resources. How can we do the most with what we've got? It's easy to make a plan and set goals and strive, but we need money to do most everything that we want to do, and that's gonna be one of our biggest challenges.
Where's that here, Mark?
I'm sorry, I'm just highlighting. I'm not gonna read verbatim
Yeah.
the whole list, because most of the comments made, if any comment was repeated at all, it's in this list. But,
So those thoughts are from your perspective then?
yeah,
School
and,
district,
yeah, that's what I came up with reading this raw data.
It's on page 4.
well, thank you.
And this page that you're looking at is one that Sam compiled.
I'll also add a couple things to that. I saw one thing pop up a few times, which hopefully we can fix with this process. I saw division a few times, and I saw lack of vision as well. So obviously, the plan will definitely, hopefully, address any concern of lack of vision, and then hopefully we can get unified around some problems. And I think it's important to also just kind of open up. We'll get more in depth at future planning sessions. Right now, this was just kind of consolidating, but are there any things that are really important that you don't think were mentioned by Mayor Beckman?
A witness, I think it's the lack of stormwater management plan and plan to get resources to it.
All right. Yeah, that one's tricky because municipalities and MSD like to point fingers at each other on who it is that needs to do it.
MSD has identified 2 projects that are almost $2
Right.
million, but they're just saying they don't have the money for it.
Exactly.
So, it exists, and they know it exists, and we know it exists.
Yeah, we thought that one major project that would affect your street was gonna be done a year ago, and it's still not looking like it's on their
They wanna,
schedule.
they wanna increase their rates.
That's their favorite refrain, is we don't have the money.
Yeah, but they
Well, that's
increase
on the
rates.
ballot.
They don't have the money right before they'll go for a tax increase.
It's not mine.
Is there any other input? I gave an assessment of what I saw with the responses, so if anybody wants to add to that, is there anything that was missed that is really, really important, or are we somewhat on the same page? And again, we've got a vision for our city, we've got a vision statement, but we need to set, find specific goals that we want to achieve. And we're not prepared to do that. We need, what are we gonna do this year? What are we gonna do in 5 years? And we need to address both of those. And so how do we get to that place? And again, we could form a committee of council people to do it. We could do it at work, dedicate time at every workshop for this project. We could put a committee of citizens together in addition to that, or we could just have a couple of public hearings and get input.
I think you should do a survey. We did it years prior to the merger. Beyond Housing was very good with helping us for it. So we did it in 3 ways. We did it door to door. We did it online. And we did it with direct mail. And so that what you do is, they're not hard to set up. I think it's just asking the questions that you want to ask. And you might think about doing it not only from an internal perspective, but from our neighbors. I gave you two different surveys, obviously, but you would have something available to anybody that borders us, to the governmental look at what they think we should do better. Because we're not in an island here, you know, this is, we're everything that happens in Belnora will affect Normandy in some way. So I think getting some perception of what they think about us. But the survey thing is really not that hard to do. You come up with the good set of questions, you can do it on SurveyMonkey. They even do graphs and charts and so forth with that software, and just getting people to do it. You know, you'd have a one-time cost of a direct mail, but it could just be a postcard that says, go to this site, or have it posted on the website so that people can go fill it out there. But he asks questions like, how long have you lived in the community? What do you like best about being here? What do you like least about being here? And I think we did it on police services, but there were a whole bunch of questions that we asked. And whether people thought that we were sustainable as a standalone municipality. So I think that putting together something like that, and that's the kind of stuff that Beyond Housing helps with a lot. You might even be able to get a graduate student to help with it. UMSL houses the Coro Foundation program. It's a graduate program for people in urban affairs. This would be you would be able to get somebody who would help to do that and be kind of your legs on the ground. They get graduate credit for it. They could do it in public administration, they could do it in business, they could do it in political science. But the Coro Foundation is a program, I went through it like eons ago, but it gives people internships in various there has to be governmental, it has to be private, you know, there's usually a labor union or something like that involved. So I think that reaching out and getting support from 24, well, Beyond Housing specifically, and or UMSL, the Coro Foundation Fellowship in Urban Affairs, might be a good way of just getting some ideas. Even when we came up with our little new logo, which is kind of obsolete now, we got help from UMSL students to put that together.
Good, I
So-
like that.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea.
My question is, and maybe we should just, what's the budget for the strategic planning process? Because right now, we don't have anything allocated for it. And even if it is just a SurveyMonkey, I mean, depending on how many respondents we're looking at, it's probably gonna be a few $100s. And so we should probably set a budget and then we can decide the best way to use those funds.
I thought SurveyMonkey was free.
It is until you get a certain amount of responses.
Yeah, until you get over like 100. I think it's like 100.
Vicky, going back to the postcard, many people are senior citizens and they don't have access to computer.
And those people, I mean, if you can get people in your wards to do a door-to-door survey, and that gets you a couple of things. That gets you face-to-face with the people who you're dealing with, gives them a little time to tell you what they think or what they feel. And what you're doing essentially is it's gonna be a box. I mean, we're not talking about long questions here. We're talking about kind of short things, multiple choice, and
I really like that.
the data input, you know, obviously somebody's gonna have to create a table and enter the stuff, but you can create a screen for that. But I think, again, getting volunteers to help with this might be possible, but a strategic, I mean, I've done it, that's what I used to do, I have to do for work, is that you've gotta look at, you really need your stakeholders. You need your direct stakeholders involved in.
I like the idea. It could be postcards, it could be Survey Monkey, both.
Well, yeah.
But I
exactly.
also like the idea if we could get a student to manage the
Data.
citizen input would be really handy. Does that
Yeah, there's
sound
a
like
lot
a-
of them
Yeah,
out there.
and
Workable.
Beyond Housing, they actually sent people here, and they were students at Humboldt who were working in public administration, I believe, or political science. But, we could reach out to the Coro program at UMSL because they're always looking at stuff to do. They're looking for projects.
So we've got limited input from this group. Is that our next step to
Yeah,
facilitate some public input?
I would think so. I think public input would
Yes.
be more,
I think we
not
have to
more
talk to, we
important,
have to
but
talk
would
to
be
the community
beneficial
about it.
because you're getting a bigger, demographic area besides just us sitting around. Because what I think is wrong, maybe a resident come up with something and tell, oh, shoot, I didn't think about that,
Right.
you know?
I did that, reading all these responses.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. Yolanda, you had something to say?
I think that we do need to talk to, like the stakeholders. I mean, we're only a group of who we are and we only see what we see, but I think talking to, like, we do need to build relationships with the people that are around us, which means Northwoods, Beverly Hills, all those communities, because
Silver City.
because we want to, like when we had our community night, like when we talk about we don't have enough money, like if we pull our resources together and do things like as a collaborative, it cuts down on the cost. So I think building those relationships and us, like puts us at an advantage.
I think those relationships are important also. I'm not sure I want citizens from other communities determining what our long-term goals are
No,
for
I
our
would be
city.
asking the government, there'd be a separate survey, and it would be for government entities, and have them
No, when I
say-
said, I meant we need to ask them what they see.
What they think of us.
And then
Okay.
we need to ask our community what they
okay.
see, yeah.
The other thing, I'm sorry, is on future opportunities, the discussion of the TDD district is not in here, which might save some cost in terms of public works and roads. You're participating.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah, so that might be something.
Yeah, that's moving along.
Well, TDD's different than Public Works, they're two separate,
Yeah.
my understanding.
Well, the TED is basically just a way to pass another sales tax for transportation projects. So, and then I know Beyond Housing they're talking about a public works district, and I don't really know what that means, but that's more.
Well, from what I heard, when I was at those meetings, and this is something I think we have to be careful of, Hagedale was kind of pushing for something that looked like the co-op, but for public works.
Right.
So, and my concern as a tiny, tiny community here is, okay, so our people would have to pay some more taxes. How do we know that a little place like Glen Echo is gonna get its fair share? Because the projects would probably be prioritized in terms of where the biggest need was, and so it could be.
Well, I will tell you, we've been invited several times to participate in that, and I'm just not interested.
Well,
Yeah,
There's,
there's two different things. There's the public work districts and then the
The
TDD.
TDD.
yeah,
Yeah,
public
and-
works
and so the-
district.
Right,
Yeah, the TDD, well, we have a meeting next Monday.
Yeah,
And then after that meeting, we'll be bringing to the council kind of what the subcommittees come up with.
okay.
And I think it's beneficial to Normandy. But as far as, okay, so I'm hearing that we want a good amount of community input in the process, and there will be some sort of cost associated with that, although there's lots of things that we can do to reduce that cost, like you said, getting potential interns. And definitely that would help with staff time, which I would love. So, I mean, we could do one of two ways. I've heard a couple things. I can try and put some numbers together and then bring those back at the next workshop, and then you decide when you see some price tags, what we want to pursue. I mean, and what we don't want to pursue, how much money we want to spend on it. Because when you talk about these things add up pretty quickly, but you get some really good, valuable information. So, just something to consider.
Would this start now, or do we have to wait till the next budget? So,
We could do a budget amendment, or is there restricted funds that would allow us to?
I mean, it would depend on how much it costs, if we need a budget amendment, or, I mean, yeah, I'll look at a few things and come back, and then, again, once we have the numbers, then we can decide, well, how we're gonna pay for it, and I think that will be a decision point.
Okay, so,
I think we could probably, if we researched it enough, there are a bunch of, we just applied for a grant for Ward 4. That was for a community, like a neighborhood,
meet and greet.
like meet and greet, and everything. So I'm sure there are organizations, so we did that through Invest STL, so I'm sure there are organizations, and like Vicky was saying, like maybe even talking to NLF to talk about like what organizations offer grants, like direct funding to
What's NLF?
the Neighborhood Leadership Foundation at UMSL, like that offer direct money to the community to do things like this. Because if you get people to come out for an Easter egg hunt, then you can ask people while they're at the Easter egg hunt. If you get people to come out for a community night, you can ask them while they're there. Or like at the Jazz Fest, you can, like we should always be looking for opportunities where we're inviting people into the community to say like, what, like this is what we're doing right now and what do you see? Like every time we're doing that, it should be an analysis of, that should be a component of our activities.
so to kind of summarize, obviously before we make any plan, we need goals. Before we can create our goals, we're looking for community input. And how long do we want to take to solicit this input from the community? Because it will take some time, I think. What do you want to give that? Like, how long do you want to give? We need so let's do this.
How are we gonna
Let's-
present it to the
Calendar.
community?
It's gonna be either postcard or Survey Monkey, or it's gonna be a list of questions,
Okay.
just like we have a list of questions.
Okay.
What do you like, what do you don't like, what do you wanna see? Where do you want the city to go?
So we're gonna have a time limit on that, on the response?
Yeah, I think so. We have to have some kind of time limit. But let Sam put together a proposed budget for that. And we'll make some phone calls, to take it, to Vicky's suggestion of trying to get UMSL involved and get maybe a grad student to facilitate the community input portion of this. That'd be a good project. But we can't let it drag forever, obviously, but yeah. Let's do that and we'll address this again at the next workshop.
Yeah, cause you figure this February, we can address it, and come up with some ideas by next month. We should be ready to hit the ground.
I think so.
In April when it
That's
starts
too
to
soon.
get warm,
Okay,
and give us one May or whatever time frame we have. And we limit it to that and just keep going.
yep.
How long does a SWOT analysis usually take to get off the ground and running?
Well, the SWOT analysis we just did, but the strategic plan, it depends. I mean, every city does it differently. I was reading an article about strategic planning in small communities, and it's ultimately up to the council, what you want it to look like. The more community engagement you add into it, the larger the scope, the longer it's gonna take, but the better plan you have.
So there's no average time
I don't know about,
communities to collect data.
to collect data. I mean, not all communities collect data for their strategic plans. Now, I mean, there's comprehensive plans, which they almost always, I mean, you have to collect data for that. I mean, some communities just create the plan and then they throw the plan out there and they invite comments on the plan. But, I mean, we haven't done any citizen surveys for a long time, so I think there's a lot of added value to that.
Yeah, I don't think, look, my thinking is, we're not the first people to do this.
Mhm.
Kirkwood's done it, Olivet's done it, Creve Court's done it, and everything. And like, as, I'm sure like, you being like a city administrator, you could probably like reach out and say like, how long did you guys take to collect data from?
I
your
actually talked to Russ, the Kirkwood city administrator, at the last SLACMA meeting and was asking him about his process. I don't think they collected any data. They just had a council retreat. And now, I'm sure Kirkwood has data from their comprehensive plan, which we don't have a comprehensive plan. So, that's why I really don't think it's not a bad idea to get that community input, because generally every 20 years you would have a comprehensive plan, which those are very, very expensive to make, and I don't really know if we have a strong need for one. We got to walk before we can run. But larger cities like Kirkwood would use they collect all their citizens' data when they do that, right? And they use consulting firms and to do all that. But some cities do collect data for their strategic plans. It just varies city by city.
I think that one of the things that we could go to, because it's fairly new, is the census data. Because it'll tell you about household size, it'll tell you about economic, and because I think one of the things that I didn't see as much of in here is that, to get a real grasp on the economic status of this municipality. How many people live in poverty? How many are under age 18? How many are over age 65? Those kinds of things, because you need to have that, and you need to be able to give that to people in a template so they can say, oh, this is what, and then it'll drive some of the decisions that are made about parks, about all kinds of stuff. But you got to look at, find out who you are from what's out there already. Just kind of establish a baseline.
So we'll present at the next meeting a proposed budget and plan of attack to solicit public comment or public opinion as to where we want to go with this. And then we'll have another discussion at that time. All good?
Good, sounds good to me.
All right.
I like.
Moving on. I can't move on because I can't find my agenda. There it is. There it is. Discussion of an application for a special use permit to open a restaurant and wine bar at 7312 Natural Bridge. Discussion I'd like to keep limited, but we do want to give you an update. Did everybody get the information that I sent out this afternoon?
Yep.
Okay. Sam, I'm gonna let you give an update as to where we're at with the process.
Sure. So they applied back at the end of November for a special use permit to operate a bar and restaurant. And this is Honey's Wine Bar and Grill. And I'll give you the full story here. So he applied. He also submitted an application for a liquor license, and I informed him that he was not eligible for a liquor license based off our code. So then he came back and he said, okay, well, I'm just gonna run a restaurant, and then this is my co-partner, they're gonna run a separate business that's a bar, and they'll apply for the business license. And I don't think there's anything that prohibits that in our code. So they applied for the special use permit. They went to planning and zoning in January with, so the special use permit has a bunch of submission requirements. A lot of them are relevant to new development. And so when they submitted their special use permit, as I would with any use that's moving into an existing building, I recommended that the commission waive some requirements. So if you look at the special use permit requirements, there's a long list of stuff, like full architectural plans and everything. Basically, what I told them that they needed to submit was an exterior and interior site plan, and some other information about their business. And so they went to planning and zoning at the first meeting. Planning and zoning had some questions, told them to come back at the February meeting. That was on Tuesday. We had some residents there, some people that are here were there. And the commission voted to recommend the approval of the special use permit for the restaurant with no conditions and the bar with the condition that they close at 10 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday and 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. And so at this point, a public hearing has been set for March 12th. And that public hearing, everyone 185 feet from the property is getting a piece of mail notifying them of the hearing. We've posted public notice of the public hearing, and that will be an opportunity for citizens and nearby property owners to come by, speak how they feel about the special use permit, and then it will be ultimately up to the council. Ahead of that meeting, we'll prepare an ordinance that is the special use permit, which you guys will ultimately vote yes or no on, and a report with all the site plans, all the information, and everything you need to know to weigh the decision. And then it gets confusing because there's multiple public hearings, but this is not the public hearing for the liquor license. This is just zoning approval. They have not submitted a complete application for their liquor license yet. And so that will more than likely be at a later date at the rate that they're going. So this is just for the zoning approval. They could get zoning approval and then not get their liquor license theoretically. So any questions?
When you say zoning approval, that's just for the restaurant then?
No, it's for the restaurant and bar. It's saying that you can have a bar in there.
But no liquor license yet?
So so what it's saying is, let's say they didn't need a special use permit and they just could operate the bar by right, because, I mean, that's the way a lot of other cities have their commercial district zoned, right? They would still need a liquor license to be able to serve alcohol, right? So it's, the liquor license is, you can sell the liquor. The special use is you can operate the larger use in that building.
They could open a bar, but they couldn't sell liquor.
That's what you said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the gist of it, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
They
it's a little
need-
funky, but it's two separate.
They
two
need
separate
both
ideas.
approvals to do what they want to do, basically.
But we're giving them some restrictions that they didn't initially want in regards to the hours and such.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the recommendation that's coming from planning and zoning is 10 o'clock closing on weekdays, 11 o'clock closing on Friday night and Saturday night. That wasn't in their initial application, but that's what the recommendation is, approval with those conditions.
share with everyone your interaction with them after the meeting, because there were 4 points that you were making to them that,
Well, I just advised them that 1 o'clock closing, hard liquor, dance floor and live music, it would be highly unlikely that they'd be able to solicit the neighbors that need to approve a liquor license. They're just not gonna go for it, and they're aware of that. And I think that's the big suspicion that we're dealing with this thing.
So when, so for the ordinance that you were talking about, like, what they needed, one of the, like, the purpose of the ordinance, like, when I was reading, was the tendency to generate excessive traffic.
Yeah.
Which the hours of operation would be 7 in the morning, was it 7?
I don't recall.
I can't remember, but till 10 o'clock or whatever. So, although
wait, no.
we
We
can't,
can.
like, I think, and this is where I kind of like disagree with the legal interpretation of like what we can ask for or whatever, because our ordinance says that excessive traffic needs to be considered. And so with 23 parking spaces for a building of that size that can house 3 to 4 businesses, is that correct, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, if they subdivided Normandy Auto Body, I mean, there's a lot of square foot.
But you said you already have 2 more business licenses
Yeah.
for that same.
That have applied.
Okay, so then that would be 3 businesses sharing 23 spaces with 8 employees that have already taken
For
up
one business.
for one business. Then this excessive traffic that is the first thing that this ordinance is supposed to recognize. I feel like they have not met the,
Well, let me ask Andy a question. I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, if this is what you're getting to. If the council determines that excessive traffic created by this business is an issue, they have every right to vote no on this application. But that being the case, you can't vote no on this one and not another restaurant,
Yeah, because that'd be it, wouldn't it?
Right, because so yes, one of the criteria in the consideration, or one of the reasons a special use permit can be required for certain uses is that use might have a tendency to generate excessive traffic, right? So, in considering whether to approve, deny, or approve with conditions a special use permit, that traffic issue can absolutely be considered by the council. That is correct.
okay.
The issues are twofold. If the issue is that a restaurant in that space, given the parking limitations in that area, stem from the fact that it's a restaurant, which inevitably has a lot of people coming and going, right, then that needs to be applied consistently, regardless of whether that restaurant wants to be open till 7 p.m. only with no alcohol versus 11 p.m. with alcohol, right? So it's just not, it needs to be applied consistently. And especially if there's gonna be outright denial based on a traffic issue as opposed to some sort of condition, the decision really needs to be articulated in a way that points to some objective traffic data.
so what
right?
I would like to see is, which I don't think this has happened yet, and I did not see it in their report, is that, let's say we say yes to the restaurant. Even with the restaurant, there is going to be excessive traffic. You have one business right now that thinks they have 23 spaces.
Right.
They think it. Then you have 2 other businesses that are going to come in and they're going to operate during the same hours, right? So then they think they also have 23 spaces. Then, from what I understood from the gentleman said that they were talking to Afro World about using their spaces and everything. We haven't, that was not, talking to Afro World, talking to the other businesses about their parking, talking to traffic in the police department about what happens because if you want to have a ban, let's say you serve no liquor, but you still want to have a ban, because that is also something that they could do, right? So if you have a band, now the band is coming, the band has people that play in the band. The band brings its own atmosphere and people that follow the band. I like Dirty Mugs. I'm going to hear Dirty Mugs. Well, I know when I go to Cybergs to hear Dirty Mugs, the population has now increased like 3-fold, right? So then how are you in those instances when you have a special event, what are you going to do to ensure that the traffic, which is excessive traffic, is going to, because you're not gonna have 12 people in there when you have a band, So those things, I think, have not been considered by them, and I think that from the area that we have and the community that we have, and also we know the traffic that is on Natural Bridge at 5 o'clock is when they would like to start serving liquor and everything. We need to make them think ahead and say, these are things that you should consider in your report.
I got a question on that. Can a council member vote no and not articulate a reason? Is that the safer way to vote no?
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's no obligation, to avoid a lawsuit or, you're saying there has to be
Well, I mean, yes and no, right? Yeah, that's the
It
answer,
depends,
right?
sorry.
It just,
Okay.
if there's a no vote and then later there's a yes vote on some other similar use and there's really no articulation why one is allowed and the other's not, then you could be opening yourself up to sue a
Okay.
lawsuit. You know.
Hypothetically
if-
speaking, right?
Go ahead, David.
Hypothetically speaking, that is.
Yeah.
Sure,
Correct.
sure, of course. You had your hand up? Okay, I'm just curious to hear what it is. So, one thing to Yolanda's point about the traffic issue is, you know, there could be a request for some sort of traffic study. I mean, those are pretty financially burdensome, right? But that is, I think, a legitimate ask, right? For a business that is requesting a special use permit. Provide a traffic study that shows how your use is going to affect parking and traffic patterns.
Well, go ahead, Sam.
Well, were you done, Andy?
Well, I was gonna kind of go into, because one of the related points that I know is, you were mentioning and was discussed Tuesday, is the fact that there are, in the zoning code, there are certain parking requirements. And for that property, this use does meet those parking requirements. Now, that is complicated by the fact that there are two other business storefronts that utilize that same parking lot, but the way I see it, it's a first in line kind of issue, right? So that particular Honey's Cafe and Wine Bar, they're the first ones that have applied for the special use permit. They, as of right now, they comply with the parking, and then once their use takes up those parking spaces, then the other two businesses, well, they may have to, you know, come to some sort of an agreement with a neighboring business.
Just to provide context, because I do the business licensing and issuing those business licenses, the two other businesses are, one is an eyelash studio, and the other one is like a salon studio, booth round place. They're only open between 10 to 6, so that provides any context as far as the decision and what the flow of traffic's gonna be.
And what I was gonna say,
How many studios?
What do you mean studios? It's one
In the,
location.
no, in the hair salon.
I have no idea.
so right now, the way our ordinances are written, it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not based off intensity, it's just based off the square footage. In my understanding, they're pretty small storefronts.
Yes.
So
But
the
that's not what
calculation,
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, as a council, I think we need to have it, if this is part of our ordinance, what I'm saying is, this is not addressed in this report. And I think this report is incomplete because we have not done our due diligence to tell them, this is something that's in our ordinance, this is something that you should think about. Clearly, they have not thought about this because it's not addressed in the report. Does
Well,
that make sense?
well, one, you don't have a full report yet. And so we'll definitely,
What was the report that we got?
you got the site plans.
We got 3 things. So
Yeah,
that
that's
wasn't it?
not the full report.
Did the report does that report that you're talking about now talk about excessive traffic?
Well, here's the thing. I think it would be highly unusual for a city to request a traffic study for an existing
I'm not
building.
asking for a traffic
Well,
study.
no, but, or anything. When you're talking about generating excessive traffic and kind of like site plan review type stuff, I generally would think that's something that a council would ask of a business for a new building coming in. This is an existing building that's been a restaurant, since it's,
For over 30 years.
yeah, for a long time. But, like, as you were talking about music, and I don't know what Andy thinks about this, but, you know, we can't require that they have more parking spaces because our code says that if they meet the regulations of the code. But can we impose limitations on special events or something like that?
Like a special event that might reasonably draw additional traffic.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
I gotta think about that one. To Sam's point, he's absolutely right. Traffic studies are usually imposed on new construction and how new
I
construction.
am not
you know what I'm saying?
asking for
No,
a
I
traffic
I know that, I know that. But
I
was
am
gonna-
asking,
I'm gonna
no,
follow up.
let me explain, because
Okay.
everybody keeps saying traffic study. What I am asking for is for them to consider the fact that they have other businesses around them and how they are going to coordinate with the police and with those other businesses when there is an excessive amount of traffic. That's the only, I'm not saying they need to go out and do a traffic study. That is not what I'm saying. But I will say this, I have seen, yes, a restaurant and bar in that spot, and I have also seen people parking on the sidewalk. This business has done that. I have seen people park in places that they're not supposed to, make up their own parking spaces. I have seen that. And I think as a council, we need to remember and think forward and say like, okay, this is something that has happened. So let's do our due diligence. If the excessive traffic is in the ordinance, and that's something that clearly we wrote this, or it was written, we didn't write it, but it was written to think about. It should be thought about. I'm not asking for a traffic study. I'm just asking to think forward and to think about the possibilities of, because this is the thing. If we don't think about it, it happens. It's like, now what are we gonna do? We didn't even have, that's what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying, and it's definitely the purpose of the ordinance. It is to control traffic. I just don't think in the rest of the ordinance, the tools are there in this scenario to require that they provide extra parking or an extra parking agreement. Now,
Then what
we
does
might
this-
be able to talk to the landlord and let them know that they're gonna tie up a bunch of spots, and then that may just by effect make them go out and find an extra parking agreement.
Okay, so then what in this ordinance, when it says a tendency to generate excessive traffic, how is that supposed to be addressed with the business?
Again, as Sam mentioned earlier, a lot of this is really geared towards new construction. So that's really gonna be geared towards new construction that's going to be bringing in additional traffic beyond the infrastructure that's already there.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's been a restaurant and bar for 20 or 30 years, it's a hard argument to make that we can't approve this because it's gonna generate
I'm
excessive
not saying
traffic.
don't approve it.
Well,
What I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, let's think
Well,
about it.
let's do this.
If
You know, I-
we
We
got,
don't, I think this conversation is one we have to have at the public hearing, where everybody can hear it. I wanted to focus on the processes, and are there any questions about that? Because we're gonna have this debate over again in 2 weeks.
But what I understood also was that we could also kick it back to P and Z and ask them to do more, to give more
That's the
information. So
council's
this is not,
prerogative.
so I just want everybody to understand that this is not, we gotta keep moving forward with this because it's an application, everything like that. We can certainly, as a council, say, we need more information, right? We can certainly say that we need you to think about this a little bit more, and we need you to like give us more, answer our questions and everything, and kick it back to P and Z, and they can do that, right?
Debbie, you had a thought?
Well, it's common sense. So if they're gonna take up all of the parking spots and there's 2 other businesses coming in, there's gonna be a clash if we don't resolve it now. It's gonna go back to what happened before, like Yolanda said, they're parking on other places that they shouldn't be parking.
they get tickets, right?
Huh?
Would they get tickets if they're illegally parked?
But why not be proactive and address the parking and make it a reasonable plan versus then having to go forward and then come back and say, oh, here's a mess again. I just think it's practicality, it's common sense.
I think there's definitely something to that, and I will call the landlord in this scenario. I'll call them tomorrow, and I'll let them know kind of what's going on, that they're dedicating, over, well, almost all of their parking spots. And I think that will perhaps stir them to come to an agreement, but I don't think it's on the council to make that agreement, if you get what I'm saying, unless we have like a public lot nearby, but we don't.
But it's on the
I
council.
don't think it's on us to make the agreement, but to make them have a plan.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. We need to, I think this ordinance says that they need to think about it. That's what this ordinance is for. They need to think about it. Right?
Well,
Is that not what the ordinance is for?
It's an element, yes, and so I think, by all means, absolutely, the council can ask for more information, like what is your plan for parking? And you can rely on, prior, data from prior bars and restaurants that have been in that spot where we know, okay, there have been parking issues. You can say, you can rely on that absolutely and say, listen, there have been similar uses in that building before. There have been traffic issues. What is your plan to ameliorate that, right? And so the reason I mentioned the traffic studies, because that's the most surefire, objective way to figure out that data, rather than just, oh, I recall that there was some issues there, which is much more anecdotal. But it still gets into kind of a squishy territory where we're possibly denying maybe a special use permit that otherwise meets the parking requirements set out in the ordinance based on something that's happened in the past. So it's just kind of a fine balance,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not saying we should deny it.
I know that.
I'm
I'm
saying we
just
should think about
addressing
it.
possible actions,
Just
right?
have a
So-
plan.
Right, but I agree. But if the plan is insufficient, then what's the
Well, no plan
what's
is
the
very
remedy?
insufficient to me. Having no plan at all is
And then
like,
what do
it's
you do if
worse.
there is no plan?
Then I think if they don't think about it, there is no plan, then they have not, like Sam continues to say, it's their job to, the burden of proof is on them.
And if they don't, how do you
And if
vote?
I feel like
Yeah.
this
I mean,
burden of
that's-
proof, you haven't done your due diligence, then my vote is no because of that.
Right.
But I'm saying, the burden of proof is on them to think about it as a bar owner, as a business owner, what am I going to do if?
Sure, and I think that's a great.
I mean,
why
you don't
it's a
wait
great
till a
idea for
fi-
the
a fire, then
administration
go
to
out
get
and buy a
involved
fire
and try to
extinguisher.
work with the landlord to figure out, hey, you've got 3 tenants here that are sharing limited parking.
Yes.
I think that's an excellent idea, but when the rubber hits the road and the council has to make a choice on this special use permit where the proposed use, considered by itself, meets the parking requirement as set out in the zoning code, I have reservations about.
How
You
can you
know.
meet when there's two other businesses?
They haven't been given a license.
Sam, you gonna speak
So
with
it's
the
first
owner?
come, first served, and then
Yeah. Well,
deal
again,
with the mess later.
yeah, this is a debate that we're gonna have at a public hearing
Right.
with the city and the residents all present.
They know
And we
about
can, we can,
Yes,
Tim, I just have a question. Is the because I've never been there, are the parking spaces marked? Or is it just,
they're marked.
they're marked?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, well, I'll say 2 last things. One, and this may be something to consider. Before 2016, there was like 10 additional parking spots there, and then we took those away with the Great Streets program. So there used to be more parking there. So that's something to consider. And then to the burden of proof, and it will be addressed in the report from P&Z to council, which we're working on right now. There are 7 specific things that they have to prove. And so if they prove all those 7 things, then it's legally advisable to issue the permit. And that's all
Okay, so
I'm
then
saying, yeah.
let me go to my other issue. A potential for attracting a large number of persons to the area and the use of creating noise and other pollutants. That's the second part of our ordinance.
right,
So,
and that was the reason that I made the motion to limit the operating hours. That right there.
so when you talk about excessive noise,
Yeah.
I would think that excessive noise would also mean people coming out of the bar.
Mm-hmm.
It would also mean the band playing, music playing. Okay, I didn't see that addressed in their report either. How are you going to ensure that the noise level that is already in the community remains at or does not exceed this certain level? That was not addressed. The other thing, when we talk about other pollutants, it says an extraordinary potential for accidents or danger to the public and health and safety. There are no there's one dumpster. There are no trash cans in front of the place. And I think that would lend itself to public safety and health, and everything, which also I did not see addressed. So this is what I'm saying. This is our ordinance, and this is our ordinance for a reason. Our ordinance says that these are the 4 things. The purpose of this special use is for this type of thing. And I do not see, this has a lot of nice things in it. And I would love to see Normandy have a restaurant. I would love to see Normandy have a bar. But I think if we don't do our due diligence now, as a council, what we're going to do is see the same things happen like in the past, and it's not gonna be any better than it was before when we weren't occupying these seats. And I want to go to a place, it's right back, I can go through the gate and I don't have to cook dinner. I would love to do that, or tell my kids to go get a plate and everything like that. However, I'm also a council person, and this is the ordinance, and we all know what the ordinance is. So let's just do our due diligence and put it in the report.
Yeah, and, I mean, those are, the noise and the trash, I think that's completely different from the parking, because
But these are 4 things that the purpose of
Right.
this particular ordinance.
but on the burden of, later on in the ordinance, when it talks about the burden of proof, they have to prove that the special use won't have a deleterious impact on the value of other properties and will be good for the neighborhood. When you talk about trash and noise, that's something that, I mean, you can definitely consider or impose conditions like you have to put trash cans out, or, it has to be, you can't exceed this level, although that's, enforcement, I think, would become an issue, potentially there. But, yeah, there's, just because P and Z recommended those 2 conditions doesn't mean the council can't impose more conditions or can't ask for additional information.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Does Normandy have a noise ordinance?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, you can't we have a noise ordinance. If someone can't sleep because you're making too much noise, then you can get a citation.
So the country club would be subject to the same ordinance?
Glen Echo
Yes.
Country Club,
Yeah.
But sometimes they get kind of loud.
kind of loud.
So here's what I'm gonna ask the council to do. Review the information that you've got. Review the information that you got, determine what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, and if it's not acceptable, are there conditions that we can put in place that would make it acceptable?
I'm gonna ask the council also to, just so you guys know, the ordinance that I'm reading from, it's 405.790. So you guys can read it for yourself. So that's all I'm saying. I'm just saying, I think the jump off point should always be our ordinances. That should always be the jump off.
405
There's actually a copy in
790.
the packet.
Yeah,
It's
we're
in
gonna
this
be
package.
looking at some possible amendments to that tonight.
All right, moving on. Discussion of Council Bill 23-31. Now, these aren't numbered because I tore my old notes up, so, let's see. Creating a mixed-use district. And the 2 issues that we were discussing at the city council meeting was, one was parking and one was fencing. Those were the 2 issues that were brought up.
I recommend addressing fencing first.
Okay.
It's gonna be a quicker issue.
And if you would bring us up to speed, you did make some changes, I saw it.
I did, so page 4 of the ordinance,
Okay, wait a minute. 4 of 8.
Creating mixed-use district, page 4.
so what is labeled section 405-1040, landscape, fence, and buffer regulations. I just added some language stating that landscape buffers and/or fencing are required along any lot line which abuts a residential lot. There's a new subsection B. In addition to any required landscape buffer where any lot line abuts the side or rear lot of any lot zoned A, B, or C, those are the residential zoning designations, a durable site-proof fence of at least 6 feet but not greater than blank feet in height shall be required within 2 feet of the lot line. Said fences shall not be constructed of chain link. So I want to know if, A, does that kind of satisfy some of the council members' concerns about making sure that there is essentially a buffer, a buttress that would solve the site issue between a residential and a commercial lot? It is drafted in a way, a site-proof fence, so those slats are gonna have to be pretty, pretty close together. I have 6 feet is the minimum. I actually, later, I believe there is a maximum height in the zoning code. as well.
7 and 8 or 8
It's
feet would
short
seem
for a
reasonable.
I think 6 is the maximum in the
Yeah,
code. though.
okay.
6
But-
is short for a fence.
For that kind of.
It's pretty standard, but
Well,
it's not,
6
there's
feet is-
definitely
That's as tall
taller.
as you,
Yeah, 6
but
feet.
that's pretty short for a fence.
Yeah, but.
For a commercial fence?
So, you know, if we wanted to move
Large
that
and look like a prison.
up in the, 7, 8, I think a 10-foot fence is probably pretty
Yeah,
You know.
obnoxious.
giant.
Yeah, prison,
Um,
we're in prison.
So
Keep us out.
the other
People
aspect
thinking
of
about
this is, in addition to like just the description of the fence and what the council wants to see, I have written that the fence would be required in addition to a
I
landscape
saw that and I was
buffer.
gonna ask that question.
But-
Do we need both?
That's for the council to decide.
And if you've got a-
Do you want one or the other? Get rid of the landscape buffer entirely and just have the fence? Minimize the landscape buffer? How do we want to work out the interaction? Because as written, this would require for any lot that abuts basically a backyard, there would have to be a 6-foot site-proof fence plus a 10-foot landscape buffer.
And
On either
I
side.
would say it's just not necessary to have
For-
both, because if you put up the fence, half your plants are gonna die anyway.
Well,
They
and
won't get any sun, right?
I'll also add, I mean, you gotta think, we do have quite a few smaller commercial lots, and so the landscape buffer in the first place just takes up a lot of space.
Yeah.
I
And
think 6 feet is too short for a fence. Rick, what's your name? Dennis says 8 feet is a normal commercial fence
Yeah.
height.
Yeah, that
So
sounds
it's for 8
right
feet,
to
isn't it?
me.
I mean, if the
8
council
feet.
wants to do that.
That's a tall fence.
Yeah, that is.
But that's a
But
commercial
that's a
fence.
commercial fence.
If, I'm looking at the potential development of the lot, the old Schulte lot and the old Nick's Lounge or whatever that was
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
Corner.
So what you need to look at, can you say abuts the lot? Because you got that alley back there.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to say, they can't go across the alley.
No, yeah, I see. Well, the alley's not their property.
No, it's not their property,
Yeah,
but it doesn't abut directly.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's hard.
Well, I would say, if I were applying this to that, I would say that they do not abut a residential district, because they abut an alley, and then it would be on the property owners on the other side of the alley to put up their own fence,
Right.
which some of them have garages.
Right, yeah.
back
Where
But
Nick's
we-
is? No, they,
No,
where the old Schulte is?
I
No, they
thought
don't have garages.
some
The
Normandy
residences.
place.
They don't have garages
yeah, they
there.
do.
No,
On Normandy Place.
because that's the.
No, they do.
There's one,
There's
there's
like
some.
3 or
But it's,
4.
they don't have,
And they get to them from that alley.
not when you get to, well, from the corner,
It doesn't go all the way down.
It doesn't go all the way down, no, it's just like 3 or 4.
It would mostly affect those properties on the south side of Normandy Place. And would you really want something like a Walgreens or, Starbucks or whatever you could get in there to not have some buffer between there and the residential area? And would it be on the property owners to have to construct a fence to protect themselves?
Here it's saying the business.
Well, I just don't, I mean, the fact is that there's an alley, unless that alley is vacated, I mean, there's technically a public right-of-way between the commercial lot and the residential lot. And so that's just kind of a weird space there, but that's just how it is.
But, wouldn't it be better to address it here than rewrite it?
I don't want a property owner having to build a fence.
I don't think it's fair for
It's not fair.
some property owners to have.
Can we
to go
change the
there.
language or specifically address that street?
We could vacate the alley. I mean,
Well, I think there's a couple of garages that use that.
exactly, yeah.
Or they
Yes.
silly.
Are
Yeah, you can't vacate
Where's
it.
this? I just wanna.
Oh,
It's
it's easier if
Suzanne.
you look at the county line, but it's right
It's,
here.
it starts with Suzanne and it goes to the corner.
I didn't think that they have gates that
It's-
actually opened. I thought they just
okay, I
had wooden
remember. Okay, I
fences
remember.
that they don't use.
There's like
The lawsuit to tear
two.
down that building.
Have garages.
But do they go in from the front or the back?
Back, Suzanne
So
goes
the
in
question
from the
is,
back.
there's this alley
Yeah, that's
here,
where their lot line is.
and
No.
this is public
Because the
right
alley
away.
cuts off when you get to
Yeah, I know.
Lee's. It
It's-
stops.
It's
Do
Suzanne.
these property owners have fences?
Some
It's
of them
not
do.
Suzanne.
Well,
Most,
sure.
I think most of them do.
And most of those are
They're
like
like,
3,
think she's
4
the
feet
only one that
fence, they're
comes
not
down
that
the alley.
big.
Because the baits come,
If something came into that corner that was big enough to take up that whole space, which obviously you'd like to see something big enough, then that would become an issue for those folks who live around there.
Well, this only would pertain to this property, right? But looking at this property, if something were to come in and build there, they would almost certainly need to get a special use permit, and I think that would be a fair condition,
Okay.
is to require a fence along that alley, right? So that only addresses this lot, right? But, you know,
Also-
maybe this probably is the only lot where this concern is gonna come up within the city of Normandy, right? So it's
But
maybe
there are
that's
uses-
we need to readdress
Go
the
ahead,
whole
Sam.
code around.
I'm looking on the county map again. I would need to see a survey because we may have already vacated that alley. Just based off how the parcels are drawn, in which case then they wouldn't need a fence. But it would come down to the survey whether that alley's been vacated. And
so it's not being
And-
built. There is a resident using it though, to get into their garage.
sure. If we have vacated, it looks like the residential people were the people who got the alley, not the.
Oh, and if that's the case, if each of those residential lots was
In which
extended
case
to
they would
encompass
need
the
a
alley,
fence.
in which case the fence would be required
But
anyway.
you can't trust the county map. You would need a survey to say for sure.
And if it became necessary, then Normandy at that point could give that property to the homeowners, right? Or
Yeah,
not?
we could theoretically vacate.
Yeah. But then they'd be responsible for paying it.
Yeah.
Right,
And maintenance and,
and maintenance.
yeah.
So we pay
Yeah.
the
I don't
first and then
expect you to have to do it.
I don't think they would want
We're
that.
not gonna do
I
that.
just, I do wanna make a comment on that fence height. That doorway right there is 7.5 feet tall. That's, you go 8 feet on the fence, that's a,
We don't need none now.
Yeah.
that's,
I'm
6
so
Right.
I'm 6'2", so it hit me right here.
I mean, you can't see through or past a 6-foot fence.
8 feet is like, you know,
how easy is it to climb a 6-foot?
Yeah,
it's not that easy. 4 feet is much easier than 6 feet. I mean, 4, 6 feet,
They do
yeah.
it.
Well, I mean, it's something that we can talk about, you know?
Yeah, take a drive by Value Village and see how tall that fence is and just measure it and say, oh, yes, sir.
How tall is that fence?
I think it's 6 feet, but I
A
could be
chain link
wrong on
fence?
that. Yeah. I could be wrong. Yeah.
I think it's the tier.
You talking about
I
Mark?
don't
The
think-
Value Village, they've got a fence around their parking
Okay.
lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Around the rear?
On the side by the
In the
post
back,
office.
yeah.
Oh, Value, okay,
Yeah.
Value Village, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
No value.
Crazy.
Anyway,
Probably.
let's everybody get an opinion on this after they look at some fencing and.
Yeah.
Well, and then the secondary question was, what do council members think about I mean,
Let's just
if
go
we're not
around and
gonna require,
solicit
if we're not gonna
answers.
require a fence and a landscape buffer, like, do we just get rid of the landscape buffer requirements? Do people just think that's probably excessive?
I think if people wanna use a landscape buffer versus a fence, that would be fine. It's gonna use up more of their property, but that's their call to make.
Wait, what?
Oh,
But-
no, I don't think.
No, I don't think
want
you should
that.
do either or.
Yeah.
I think it should be a
Be a
fence
fence.
with no landscape buffer.
Right.
So you're gonna
Okay.
require a fence even if they put up a landscape buffer.
I don't think they should, I think it should just be a fence.
All right,
Yeah, no requirement of a
No
landscape
landscape
buffer.
buffer. It should just be a fence.
anybody else?
So when it says no chain link,
When if they don't want a fence?
No chain link. That's, I mean,
so they can use anything, does it have to be, okay, can we say like you have to use what's those white
Well,
ones?
Andy just described.
You have to use a vinyl, can we say you have to use a vinyl fence for
you can
uniformity?
get more specific on the
Final
We're gonna take care of
materials.
quickly.
You know?
It's a business though. It's a
Oh, okay,
business.
A lot of businesses don't really like, I mean, it just depends on the business, but vinyl is not as sturdy, I mean, it just doesn't
Right,
last
it's
as well
gonna-
as, when it
right.
gets dirty, it's,
Right.
you know.
It's
What do
not
they
gonna
use?
be what we
You can
wanna,
repair the wood
would,
easier.
yeah,
Then vinyl, yeah.
yeah.
Can we say what kind of wood?
Or the, what
Because
about,
wood also wears out.
cause they have the chain link. that
Yeah,
they
I mean,
put
you
the-
can, it just gets to be a little more,
When you get very specific in a zoning code like that, usually you want to have some sort of like aesthetic plan in your comprehensive plan kind of laid out that justifies the decision. not saying that you can't do it, but just generally when you get like real specific on what things look like, as opposed to like where things are and what things are, I would feel more, and Andy, maybe you're more comfortable, I would feel more comfortable if we had something like in a comprehensive plan justifying that decision, if that makes
Like,
sense.
I would like to see something.
And we
that,
don't
like-
have a comprehensive.
She
Yeah.
can't see through it, yeah.
But what I'm saying is, if we say it can't be chain link, and then somebody says, I like vinyl, and then they do that, and then the other business comes and say, I like wood, and then they do that, and then it looks like a hodgepodge of a bunch of fences. You get what I'm saying?
Sure.
Sure.
So, that's not a good look either, is what I'm saying.
Well, you know, I have a friend that stays out where this is Old Fallon, but the subdivision that he stays in, they require everybody to have wrought iron fences. Everybody.
But this is for a business, it's not for the.
But still, I'm just saying, you
Yeah.
know, can we
So
do
we
something
can-
like
yeah.
that? Just require them
I
to
think
have a
that's
certain type of
smart.
fence.
You can see through the wrought iron.
I mean, certainly, yes, it is possible to draft ordinances that require certain fencing materials, certain appearances. As Sam said, they're usually tied to a comprehensive plan, or they're tied to a form-based district, which, you know, we've talked about form-based districts, in terms of other mixed-use districts, and, they can be very, I'll say like top-heavy in terms of trying to administer a form-based district. I think some minimal, if the council were inclined to add some sort of restrictions on the materials of a fence, I would want to draft it in a way that gives some options maybe, as opposed to saying, well, you have to build a fence, it has to be 8 feet tall, and it has to be cedar, right? That's just getting a little, having fought,
Visuals,
having
what we're going
battled
for.
with fencing ordinances from the other side, representing businesses, I've gotten those overcome before.
Yeah,
So
we
how
say-
about a no see-through fence that's either shadow box or decorative vinyl? Is that broad enough?
Shadow box.
Staggered.
You stagger the boards and you can't see through them now. It's
Unless you
spaced
get up
on
there.
both
I
sides.
know.
You know, unless you
Yeah.
get to the side.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to do that, right? I mean,
Can we say that it has to be consistent with the fencing that's already been established?
What's back
Chain link.
Right, no, the one that we have at the.
Well, that doesn't block the view though. That's
No.
kind of
Yeah.
defeating the purpose.
yeah, kind of the purpose is to,
Just
right.
had a wrought iron.
Yeah, it's a right iron.
We're living with old decisions.
You know, I would almost be more, if we're already drafting this in a way that says no chain link, I would almost think just saying no vinyl would be easier, because that seems to be the concern, is vinyl.
Because the chain link, you can put those,
Slats.
yeah, that go.
Yeah,
that
there's-
weave through it.
Right,
you
but that
can-
looks very, like.
In the
industrial.
3 years when they all start
Yeah, it looks-
falling apart.
Right, exactly. Which this is
It comes in different colors.
intended as a residential
Yeah,
buffer.
shadow box and style.
You could say shadow box, and then, you know, the vinyl, do they make vinyl shadow box?
Yeah,
I
they
don't
do.
think, do they?
Yeah.
I'm not aware. Okay.
Well, a lot of people go into composite
Is
fencing
it shadow
now.
box?
Well, this fence we got right out here on our property, it's vinyl, it's decorative
Well,
vinyl. It's not a
but that's
bad
the
looking
same.
fence.
The thing is when it needs repair, then they need to repair it. And if it looks bad,
It's a code
then,
enforcement.
right.
I was gonna say, I like
Rick
the
goes
idea of
over and
composite
says-
or wood.
Yeah, I like composite too. Yeah,
Or
last
wood,
thing.
you let them do either one. Composite lasts, it's more
And one
expensive.
thing about, the plastic fencing, you really can't repair it. You have to replace
Replace
it.
it, right,
Once a
that's right.
section breaks, you have to replace it.
Yeah,
You know, because the plastic cracks
and
and
the styles are ever changing, you're
Yeah,
not, you
and you're
break a
gonna
piece
get-
out.
you're done.
Or the wood is gonna be more consistent.
Could you say composite or wood, and just leave it there, shadow box style?
Yeah, I hate those dang, stockade fences. Those look horrible. We don't want that.
We'll put the points,
Yeah. You buy sections 7 feet long.
Yeah.
looks like a Ford.
So some language that would, you know, composite or wood shadow box. I think that's, I really have no objection to the vinyl fences. Some of them look pretty good. Some of them look really good.
It looks like.
They've got decorative, I don't mind vinyl fencing.
Oh, this?
It's
No, but I
maintenance.
understand that there's some concern about the, kind of the cohesive aesthetic of all the properties along the mixed use district.
Okay.
One thing about it with composite and wood, you can
This
become, get real creative. Just like the fence between my house and my neighbors, I built that.
Okay,
Yeah.
And the wind can
You
go
see, I
through,
got
so it
the
doesn't-
see-through at the top and,
all right.
you know, so you can become real creative.
So the wind just goes through and it has less.
Been standing for 20 years.
That ain't bad.
So then the other, assuming we're done with fencing,
I think so.
the other aspect of the mixed use,
Wait, what about the height?
Well, we're gonna do some research
Oh,
and let
okay.
everybody walk up with some fences with a tape measure, rather than trying to
Go ahead.
imagine what
Or
it's
just
gonna
stand
look like.
up to it.
Yeah,
parking regulations. So right now, the mixed use district has no parking regulations. I mean, that is kind of the cutting edge of modern zoning practice. But I included two samples of two different kind of types of zoning codes. One is the existing parking regulation for the E district, which also applies in the F district.
what page are you
Normandy
on?
code, sorry, this is the page after page 8 of the ordinance.
Got it.
So
The pages.
in E and F districts right now, commercial buildings shall provide space upon the lot in the ratio of not less than one parking space for each 300 square feet of floor space in the building used for commercial purposes, and then there are some caveats for different types of uses. So that's one option. It's straightforward, it's pretty simple. But then I also, the next several pages are an excerpt from the fluorescent parking regulation. This is something that a lot of other area codes do. They have a breakdown of different parking requirements for different uses. Some of these, many of these are still tied to the square footage or the gross floor area of the use, but there are some that you can see have some alternative metric that they tie the parking requirement to. So for example, banquet facilities, one space for every 4 seats. Car wash, parking stacking equal to 5 times the capacity of the car wash beyond the cars in the wash, right?
What does 5 stacking mean?
That's basically having,
How long your
how
drive-through
long,
has to be.
exactly.
Pick up the car.
So,
Got it,
you know,
got it, yeah, thanks.
essentially, with the mixed-use district, like what we have proposed, that has a breakdown of the different permitted uses and special uses, right? There could be a parking component that basically, it could be drafted in a way that, each use shall, or, a use shall have one parking space for every 300 square feet except the following uses, and then it could be restaurants, one parking space per 4 seats or something, or, there's ways to kind of break that down if there are concerns about just applying a uniform parking metric to
Yeah,
every single use.
definitely.
Different uses are gonna have different parking needs, right? They're gonna generate different traffic patterns. So those are kind of your two options. One thing that's kind of unique about Normandy's zoning code compared to some other zoning codes, like fluorescence, which again, this fluorescence, this is a separate ordinance from the use ordinances, the district use regulations that are applicable across the board. And so anytime someone is planning on operating a new use in a zoning district, they actually have to make reference to the separate parking ordinance to determine, okay, and it can be a pretty complex calculus, right?
Tell you how to-
I cut out quite a lot of the fluorescent ordinance, which, includes a lot of like
Monitor
actual,
all
like the layout of the stalls and things like that. I mean, it gets very, very, over the top. Normandy's, is a little more minimal. The parking regulations are actually there is not a separate parking ordinance. Each use ordinance has its parking regulation in the actual that section of the code, as opposed to having to refer to a separate section of the code for each parking regulation. So, given that that's the case, it seems kind of like reinventing the wheel to have some sort of separate parking ordinance that then, like, that would kind of require major surgery to the zoning code. So if you're inclined to include parking regulations, I would include them under the mixed-use code. But again, I'm just curious, like, do people like the square footage model? Do they want to include a breakdown of different parking requirements by use? What are people's thoughts?
Well, I can tell you that the recommendation from planning and zoning came from a lot of discussion. Part of it, Sam mentioned, Great Streets came through and ate up a lot of people's
Yeah.
parking. And there's buildings based on square footage, you're not gonna be able to use your building based on our existing code. So their recommendation was not to have parking requirements. Business owners know what they need to bring their, deal with the customer that they're gonna have, and they're gonna have to deal with it. They're either gonna have a business model that's gonna make money or not based on available parking, and there was a lot of discussion over it, and they said, let's just knock out the parking requirements and let people make their own plans to park people. If they can't, they're not gonna get them to the business anyway.
Who determines if they can?
Well, would you open a business if you couldn't get people to your business?
Well, they're trying.
Well,
Where would you go to
I
park?
mean, we have seen it before, so who would determine, like I said, if you can or cannot? I mean, we've seen it before, yes,
But
people
lived
do.
it.
Vacant buildings on Natural Bridge.
Well, that might not be the case, but if you look at that corner,
Yeah, I think
because
so.
I'm always focusing on the corner, Lucas and Hunt and Natural Bridge, if you were to have somebody who bought that, let's say from the corner all the way past Schulte, and he bought that little house or whatever
Yeah,
that building
that's
is,
what they talked about.
knocked it all down, but put in, commercial space down on the bottom and apartments on top, which some places do. They got a whole strip of them along in Florissant.
Ferguson.
Yeah, in Ferguson, yeah, that's what I meant. And, which would be a good look for that corner. And somebody might invest some money in doing that. So would you need then to have, cause that would be this mixed-use district that you're, so you need to have some kind of parking regs for them.
Yeah.
On Florissant, they park behind the buildings, but I don't know if that lot's that big, so.
I don't think having no parking,
Oh, yeah, that lot is pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 50
From
to
that
100
corner,
parking spots
some
back there,
bird
believe it or
and
not, yeah.
Well, I think that's the question. They obviously need parking. The question is, do they need parking regulations? Are they
Yes.
smart enough to build a building and put parking spaces for their,
No.
or do
No.
we need to regulate that?
Yeah,
Yes.
Expect it, yeah.
Well, I think,
That's totally, I think that's totally reasonable position.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a standard position,
definitely
right?
the traditional way of doing
Right.
things, and that's.
So-
And that's the council's prerogative, right?
Right,
So then the
it
question is,
absolutely is. So that's the question.
what
and
does the
just-
parking regulation look
Let's
like
just
then?
solicit opinions. Are we talking about keeping our existing parking regulations in place versus no parking regulations, which is currently written in the mixed-use district ordinance? So let's just go around the table and see what you want to see.
Yeah, and I'll say, if it's the existing parking ordinance, then that's easy, all right, that's really, really easy. If it's the other one, then more than likely what we'll do is probably just take the uses that are allowable in the mixed-use district from this Florissant code and then just create our own table. And then if there's something that seems unreasonable for Normandy, that's reasonable for Florissant, because we are different communities, very different communities, then we'll change it, or the council can change it.
Well, let this start. Vicki, what's your position?
I would think that you need some regulations, rather than not have any at all.
Okay, Karen? Steve?
I'd rather keep what we have.
Okay, Yolanda?
I like to see what Florissant has, something that's more specific.
Okay, Debbie?
We need regulations, yeah. And if we need to study Florissant and adapt it to take out the good that might apply to Normandy.
I would like to keep what we have,
Meaning,
yeah,
Regulation.
yeah, as far as parking.
No regulations.
What's David?
So we've got 3 no regulations, but
David.
David's got a,
David?
Keep what we have, please.
Okay, so we've got a mix of, the no regulations clearly is not in the majority. But we've had adopt a plan similar to fluorescence or keep what we have. So I'm gonna just ask for hands at this point. Keep what we, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Keep what do you have now?
Oh, it's,
I'm a little confused
Yeah,
by
I'm
keep what we have.
confused, yeah.
oh, keep what I have means the parking restrictions that you,
By square footage.
that
That exists now.
that exist now.
Yeah.
Incorporate those into the mixed.
oh,
use.
I see, so,
Yeah.
so any.
Keep
okay,
parking
so-
restrictions consistent with our old code.
Well, and to be, also just to, something that I feel like gets lost in the shuffle here when we're talking about this is, I mean, we all kind of know what areas we're thinking are probably gonna end up being rezoned mixed use, but none have been, right? And that's a separate process that has to occur even after this is adopted, right? So, basically what I'm saying is different parcels are gonna be zoned differently, and so by saying keep what we have, do we mean like each parcel that gets rezoned would just keep its old parking regulations? Or do we want to incorporate an existing parking regulation such as the E district into the mixed use?
And I think that's where everybody's at, incorporating those parking restrictions into the MU district.
So, okay, so
Well-
the 3 options then are kind of, if I may, no parking regulations, incorporate a uniform square footage based parking requirement, or incorporate a more tailored use-based table
Okay,
element.
go ahead, Sam.
I'll just say, my recommendation is, I don't really like the parking regulations that we have now. I just think that no thought went behind it. They just adopted it in 1945 because they needed to adopt it.
Yeah, we
It's a
need
very
to.
different.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, if we're going to have parking regulations, I would recommend tailoring it. I don't know if we have to tailor it to the degree that Florissant has tailored
No.
it.
Right.
I would
But,
like something like this.
yeah, because right now, we,
Oh, we can agree upon that.
So,
Let's
just to be
table it.
clear, our no parking regulations, because there was some confusion, who's on board with no parking regulations? We're the minority. So now we're looking at something similar to
Wait,
Florissant,
Wait a minute, what did you just,
What do we-
so
we're the
The
minority.
3 of you?
you don't want any parking regulations?
Right, but I don't have the support for
Okay.
that, so now we're moving on. So now we're talking about adopting a plan similar to Florissant, is that sound like what we want to do?
I think when.
Yes, based on what Sam just said, yes.
Yeah, I think, amending the existing thing so that it has more of the defined uses
Yes.
for some space.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll work on that.
We'll put something together for consideration next month.
Good.
Can I ask you a question? What does
Sure.
GFA stand for?
Gross floor area.
What is that?
Gross
How is
floor.
that different from square footage?
So the square footage.
It's an outside
well,
dimension.
so,
And that's,
what's that?
It's an outside dimension.
So yeah, gross floor area basically includes everything, but it doesn't include like there's a definition in a building code anywhere. But basically it includes, in most cases, it includes everything, including like bathrooms, it would include the kitchen, of like a restaurant. But like walkways, depending on if the walkway is like outside or inside, may or may not be.
But it's basically
Yeah.
the
Right,
perimeter
and,
of.
and square
the area of
footage,
the building.
square footage also includes stairways, which are not probably
Right.
calculated
Yeah.
in gross floor area.
Okay.
All right,
that's a bad example. That's my opinion.
I'm sorry,
Florissant is a bad example. The other-
it's a model,
Yeah.
Well, we can,
yeah.
Is it up? I
Adapt
mean,
it.
can you find out
Is the easiest way
regulations?
to.
Yeah,
Make sure
but,
that-
oh, okay, I got you. Cause I was looking more
There's a lot
sort
of pretty, there's a
communities
lot
our
of very
size.
complex, like.
Okay, we got 2 of the
Yeah.
3
There's a lot of
worked
very
out.
complex.
So here's an example.
I don't wanna drop a
So parking
16-page
and
parking
finish,
ordinance on the
and
council.
then this is Florissant's,
It's 2 pages, right?
example. What page?
I'm just looking at the agenda.
Oh, you're just looking at the.
The last item on the agenda
We're on number 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Council Bill 23-33. I
Well,
don't,
I thought we were still, we 32.
32.
We still have to discuss the site plan review.
Do we have anything?
oh,
Oh, we
that's
went out
right.
of order.
Yeah,
Oh,
we-
wait, so what are we on?
Yeah, yeah. I went out of order because they were stapled out of order, but that's okay. We got,
Oh, my packet.
let's see,
There's a ring.
the mixed use, okay, there's the mixed. Okay, 2332, uniform site plan review. The only disagreement we had on this bill was, as written, planning and zoning would do site plan review for approval. And there was some opinion that the council wants to be involved in some site plan review. Some said yes, some said they don't want any part of it, and that's where we're at.
All right, Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
So what I've added, this would be page 3 of Council Bill 2332. Starting at the bottom of page 3 and then continuing basically through the remainder of the ordinance. So after P and Z performs their review, within 30 days, P and Z would file its recommendation with the council. The council would then hold a public hearing, and at its discretion could add, delete, or, make conditions to whatever. The site plan, there'd be a public hearing, and then at that time, they could approve or send back to the, much like the special use permit ordinance, they could approve it, send it back to P and Z for more review, whatever. And then, so that would be, approval would fall to the council, right? Then, rather than the council serving as the appellate body, if an applicant or the city or whomever doesn't like the council's decision, an appeal could be made to the Board of Adjustment. And that is a traditional role for the Board of Adjustment under the,
Do we have a board of adjustment?
we do have a Board of Adjustment, yes.
They've never had an occasion to meet because it's just never been
Oh.
a reason.
Well, at least not in the past, like 15 years or something. It's
Are there
been-
members on the
Not
board
since
of
I've been.
adjustment?
Yeah. We appointed them and everything.
Yeah. So, and so then this is a pretty standard, we have a full Board of Adjustment ordinance, which provides for the appellate procedures and things like that. And so this largely incorporates a lot of that in terms of notice requirements and things like that. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it.
So a question, prior to this change, the appellate review was the council.
Correct.
Now the council makes the, what would we call the final decision, but it can be appealed to the Board of Adjustment.
Correct.
So, okay,
So the planning and zoning recommends
yes.
to the board who approves or disapproves, and then the appeal, okay.
Right, site plan comes in, Sam takes a look at it, reviews it with Public Works, Police Department, everybody, chimes in with their comments. Sam puts together a report, submits that report to P and Z. P and Z then considers the submission, decides whether to approve with conditions, or deny, or recommend denial, recommend. Submits its recommendation to the council. The council then holds a public hearing, has more conversations, and then decides whether to approve with conditions, or deny. If they deny, then the applicant can apply to the Board of Adjustment for an appeal. If they don't like what the Board of Adjustment says, then they can file an appeal with the court. So there's lots there. The Board of Adjustment, I included some language in here that there are very particular content that has to be included in the filing, right? Which can be a useful tool to kind of require the applicant to kind of show their hand at this level before things get to court, which is a very useful tool, right? To make sure that the city is aware of all of the possible claims at the Board of Adjustment level. So it's a pretty standard drafting. So
Okay.
it's
And I'm gonna
there are
ask-
advantages to
I'm
this.
gonna ask Sam his position on this. I mean, before this was left in planning and zoning, appeal to the council, and there was a split as to whether the council wanted to be involved in that or not. what's your take on, what would be a more normal process? for
Well,
this?
I think it's fine, going to the council, because a lot of times you will have a site plan alongside a special use permit.
Okay.
And so it basically runs a very similar process to the special use permit, which we just talked about a bunch. So I think it's fine.
This is fine.
Yeah, admittedly, it'd be a little odd as drafted, so
Okay.
someone applies for a special use permit, they have to submit a site plan with that. The site plan and the special use permit both go to P and Z. P and Z approves the site plan, but then recommends approval on the special use permit. You see how it could
Okay.
get a little wonky, right?
Is there anybody that's not good with this amended language?
I have a process question. With the mixed use zone, does it follow the same process? Does somebody have to come in and look for a variance there or whatever? The site plan approval,
The mixed use,
I mean, they don't need to apply for a special use?
certain developments will.
So there's
New construction.
Drive-through
Correct me if I'm
Here's the
wrong.
difference.
Go ahead, Sam.
So a special use permit always requires a site plan review.
Right.
But there are site plan reviews that aren't attached to special use permits. And those, and this is written, basically, any new building in a commercial district requires a site plan review.
Okay.
And
That's why we needed to pass all three of these at the same time. We pulled some of this language out and created a separate ordinance for site plan review because it applies to special use permits and other,
Other stuff,
yeah.
like if somebody wants to turn their Tudor style house into some other kind of craft.
Some other kind of crap.
I mean, I saw a nice little Tudor house that it's for sale in St. Louis City, and they put all this modern looking stuff on it, the house looks weird.
So we're all on the same page on 23-32?
Go.
Yeah, I am.
All right. Now we're going to go to
That's how we want it.
23-33. And I'm not aware that there was any issues with any of the language in this. We're just holding off passing this so that we can pass 31, 32, and 33 together because they all refer to each other. Is there any issues with 23-33?
There shouldn't be, again, we just didn't want to adopt that.
Yeah.
Without also adopting the site plan ordinance, because then we wouldn't have a site plan.
Yeah, exactly.
process.
Deanna? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Because I know we had the first reading of this in December before establishing the new normative. Do we have to do another system?
I would like to do, just start fresh on all of these, first and second readings. I think it's just, yeah,
Okay.
safe.
All right, unless there's any other business that we need to address.
There's back sheet.
Resolution.
Oh, yeah. Sam explained, we've got the construction workers over here want to use this place across the street for parking.
yeah, and they want to pay us $1,500 a month
Extra
to do
money
it.
coming
I suspect if we don't do it, then they'll probably, well, this is his kind of threat to me, not threat, but he said, we'll probably be parking on Augusta and all these, you know, they'll just
They
find
have to find
on-street
some
parking.
park.
Yeah, they have to park somewhere.
Yeah, but basically, they're getting to the point where they're bringing in tradesmen,
Yeah.
and the parking that they have on the site right now is not enough, so it'll help with the mortgage.
Any questions?
What happened to the other place? Did you talk about the old funeral home?
So we can terminate within 30 days.
Okay.
So if we get a contract in place, we can just,
Okay.
Well, the
that'll
people,
be rolled into any.
aren't they gonna be, what, they're just cars? They're not
Workers.
Probably a bunch of pickup trucks.
But not heavy equipment.
No, these are people just work there.
Okay, because I was
Tradesmen, yeah.
concerned about what the people on Augusta might. They used to get upset about parking on the funeral.
Sure.
So, resolution 24-05, a resolution of the city of Normandy, Missouri authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with McCarthy Building Company Incorporated to provide parking at 7733 Natural Bridge. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 24-05?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David. Night, David.
I'm pointing to there, but the camera's probably there.
How's your trip, David? How's your vacation?
Oh, it was absolutely lovely. We got to have a wonderful time.
Good.
California for Chinese New Year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Did she mention that? Yeah. Yeah, the timing just didn't work out, but. Yeah, I didn't want to leave her hanging, so, you know, I appreciate the referral.
Yeah, no doubt. We try to collaborate.
Oh, hey, he's not.
No, not
Everybody.
Oh, no, I didn't hear it.
So for our audit, we've got these, what are they? They're called